separate politics, energy, and climate change?
Well, that's tricky.
Focus on the localized potential of renewable energy and its challenges. So we are going to look at Tanzania and Kenya as our case studies, because my guests are from Tanzania and Kenya, and that is Phil Msuya, who is the country coordinator, private financing advisory network, and is also a renewable energy consultant. And Kefas Okaka, who is the co-founder of Biomaka in Kenya, and is also a briquettes production consultant and an environmental scientist. So why renewable energy? Why are we talking about renewable energy? How significant is it to us as the human beings, to the environment, to our economy?
Renewable energy is the way forward. We don't need to think of ourselves, but we need to think of future. And in that case, there is no way we are going to use any other source which is not renewable. An example is India, for example, that they've been using thermal power, coal, and the remaining coal, it's only sufficient for 200 years. And you see now they're not even using their own coal because of the low caloric value. They are now going to Australia, Mozambique to fetch this coal. So this is just the evidence to the people that they've advanced. You know, in India, you don't need to have any permission to put up a thermal plant. You have money, just go there and do it. So with those kind of regulations, people have exploited all the coal, and it's now about to finish. This is why it's better to focus on the things that are environmental friendly and they are for future generations. That's what I can say.
Okay, thank you. Kefas.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. I like to say that renewable energy is the energy of the future. As you have already understood that there are limitations to the current energy we are using, for example, fossil fuels. It's come to reality that oil is going to be exhausted in a few hundred years. And what are we going to do after that? So we need to find solutions for consistency in energy that go beyond oil. And that's why we are looking towards renewable energy. At the same time, our environment is experiencing a lot of challenges in terms of carbon emissions, global warming. So in response to that, that's why we need to start early and start working towards adopting renewable energy solutions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's come here back to home, that is Tanzania and Kenya, and let's look at our progress. How far have we progressed in terms of renewable energy? Phil, I go to you.
Well, things are not moving so well in my country. This is because maybe because we are thinking in just about 2-3 years we'll be having a very big project, which is a hydro project. We call it Mwalimu Nyerere or Stigler's Gorge. But in reality, it might take time until when we commission that project, until when we have proper lines to evacuate that power. And in so speaking, for example, in my country, we've been having some delays on signing SPPAs, which are small power producers agreement, to sell to TANESCO. So when you have the mini grids, the small hydros, small wind and solar guys, they are helping first to stabilize the grid, the national grid, but second, they are helping, to go to the areas where the national grid won't be able to go. But when the regulations, when the regulator, the utility company and developers are not talking, and we have lost up to 2 years just to get these signed, you find people, we are going backwards, not forwards. We have just signed these SPPAs last year, but until today, no one has actually signed with TANESCO. Meaning there is not any new investment that has come in the country for renewable. It is in a small scale of the people that are doing, doing waste to energy, but in a very small amount of project. But also we had a very large project last year. UNIDO, World Bank, and Tanzania Investment Bank, they've just commissioned an ethanol project in Dar, and this is because Dar is consuming a lot of charcoal. Actually, half of the charcoal that is produced in the country goes to Dar. So in terms of Tanzania, we are not progressing in renewable energy. Actually, we are stuck. I could say that.
Okay, let me ask you, Phil, what could be the problem now that you're not progressing? You signed projects, but then there's no progress. What could be the problem?
When you talk of renewable energy and climate change, this should not be political by any means. This should be, we should go by reality, and we should let our professionals do what they do best. But when we are using this as part of politics, we are not progressing. That's what I can say. So we are stuck because of political will.
In terms of the progress of renewable energy development in Kenya, I can say we have been trying, but we have still not been able to maintain the trajectory that I would like, or our stakeholders would like. The first issue is lack of funding, especially among the youth groups. But I have been able to see the ability to develop renewable energy in terms of briquette production. There has been massive growth. I've been training more people. There have been more people interested in the project. There have been more people buying into machines for briquette production. So at least I can say that to me is evidence enough that we are moving towards renewable energy. But still the space is still a bit low. And we would like to see more and more involvement in terms of the government support towards renewable energy solutions in terms of solar energy, briquette, biogas, and as well as other projects. But in overall, like I said, we are doing good, but we can always do better.
Okay, without dwelling much on the national scope, let's come to the local people. For someone who is in the village, someone in the slum area, or someone else like myself who wants to establish or who wants to start a renewable energy project, am I in a position to just start, or there are obstacles that will hinder me from starting that project?
For me, I would like to say that the major problems or challenges that hinder the local people from actually accessing and moving towards renewable energy solution basically start from information and cost. Those are the two main problems I look at. In terms of information, I like to say that most people do not have access to the information to understand what are renewable energy solutions, what can I do at my own level, and what is accessible to me to be able to move towards, for example, producing or utilizing renewable energy solution. So that's what I'd like to say. That's my problem number one. Problem number two goes to cost. For example, if I talk about in my field, if you are moving towards briquette production will be a bit intensive in terms of cost. To procure the machines, to produce everything, to procure the raw materials. So all that is a major hindrance to local people. For example, if you want to start a briquette production company or just a small scale, you're going to have to spend a few dollars, about $100 just to get started. And that's not a lot. That's a lot of money most people do not have. So my issues boil down to both cost and information. Thank you.
Okay. Phil.
I'll not repeat what Kefa has said because it's just the same as in here. But I want to challenge people like Kefa in my country, not in Kenya, because I know capital markets are so well developed in Kenya. So project financing is not a new thing in Kenya. Well, in our country is quite different. So we have bankers and other institutions that do not even understand what is climate smart agriculture, or what is renewable energy, and what is climate change, and how they can fund these projects. So we have a problem from investment point of view. As in investors, they are not well informed of these type of projects. But at the same time, we have developers who are so passionate to do these projects, but they are not ready for all the paperwork that banks and investors would like them to do. So you might find out all these initiatives by donor community, they are going to be in a very small scale, just because we don't have youth or people who are ready to spend all their life like Kefa and do something big. Of course, we know it will start as a small project, but you need to spend a lot of time making sure you develop a very robust project so that it can be bankable. And that's the problem I see to developers, mainly in the country where I'm from.
Okay, thank you. Let's move from the development aspect and all that to now climate change and renewable energy. Why do we emphasize renewable energy, and how important is it to the spectrum of climate change? Phil?
Well, you cannot separate the two. You need just to understand renewable energy. When you talk of energy sector in climate change, you talk of mitigation sector. That is so helpful to the future generation. So climate change has two things. It's climate change and adaptation and mitigation. Renewable energy is key to mitigate climate change. And for a particular East Africa, we have what we call East African climate change paradox. So our climate change, it cannot be even predicted anymore. So renewable energy, since energy sector is so huge and takes a lot of whatever you touch needs energy, this is where it's key to use renewable energy rather than fossil fuel in either other source. So when you manage to make sure everybody is on renewable energy, maybe 100% or 7%. For example, I'm sure in Kenya it's not a problem of having access to energy anymore. It's just a problem of is that power renewable energy. In our case, this is a huge problem. So all the donors are coming in, the churches and all the youth are now into, for example, hydro in the southern side of the country, because our 50% of our energy is coming from fossil fuel. So we are trying so hard to make sure by maybe 2025, we are using hydros and solar and wind to at least to contribute on mitigating the effects of the climate change. So for me, I'll say, if you succeed on having all the country on renewable energy, then the chances of our future generation to survive, you can see a light in the tunnel, if you know what I mean.
Well, for the record, Phil, here in Kenya, there's still a challenge of access to energy. It's not like everyone can access energy. Because if you go to the rural areas, most of the people are not powered. In slum areas, there are some slum areas where they cannot access electricity. So it's not like we are already there. No.
As we move towards adopting renewable energy, I think we at the same time are able to achieve climate change protection. For example, if we turn towards briquette production, we're able to reduce deforestation, we're able to reduce carbon emissions. So I like to say they are both two sides of the same coin: climate change and renewable energy. So by working towards advancing renewable energy solutions, we are able to achieve a cleaner climate and able to protect our future environment as well.
Well, and I think you'll agree with me, Phil and Kefas, that our renewable energy right now are not entirely renewable, in such a way that we are still using the non-renewable sources to power them. Let's say hydro. Hydro, we are using petrol to run the turbines.
Sure.
Briquettes, we are still emitting a lot of carbon. Maybe you cannot quantify, but we are. But I think it's all about how far are we moving from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy, or rather the clean energy. I don't know what you can say.
For me, I'll tell you, there are some people now are thinking on having hybrid systems. For example, what if a hydro plant will start using solar, energy? So these are the things people are thinking to use in the future, so that at least you have a way to say 100% I'm using solar. So hybrid system are coming up. I know one of I think there's a company that is working hard. Probably they'll commission that project this year. It's wind, hydro, and solar together. So we are not there, yes, but at least we are trying. So I could say it's best if we progress at increasing rate, but not at decreasing rate.
Absolutely. So, like Phil, you already said that we are trying. We have the wind energy, we have the solar energy. Okay, let me ask you, in Tanzania, do you have wind power plants or maybe solar power plants?
Actually, you said wind or solar?
Either of them or both.
I started a project of wind hydro before I left the company. I used to work with them. It's called Rift Valley Energy. I think they will be commissioning this plant by early June. The plant will be commissioned. It will be a 2.5 megawatts. It's a hybrid of hydro and wind. So yes, there was some political issues on the wind projects, but now at least there is one private company that is about to commission. They are now this week erecting a second turbine. So I'm sure by end of June or mid June or early June, they are going to commission the project.
Before we proceed, there's a question here, Kefa,
Okay.
from one of our viewers. He's called Solomon. He's asking, what are some of the feedstocks for briquettes?
Okay, we use a couple of raw materials. For example, we carbonize what are they called? Coffee husks. We carbonize rice husks, and we also carbonize any agricultural products coming from the farms. But mostly we go for coffee husks because they have a higher calorific value. And if you are in a place like Mombasa, you can also try to use coconut husks. They also have a higher calorific value, so they tend to produce briquettes of a higher quality as well. When it comes to briquette production, the raw materials you use will ultimately decide the quality of the product you're going to come up with. So the raw materials you're selecting from, all agricultural raw materials can be used, from sugarcane waste, coffee, maize stalks, everything agricultural can be used for producing charcoal briquettes. But the quality will also vary based on the quality of the raw materials you're using. In terms of calorific value, we rate coconut husks above all, and then we go for coffee husks, rice husks, and all other agricultural waste materials. So you have to do your research and determine what the kind of quality of briquettes you want to produce and what they're going to be used for. So every agricultural waste material can be used for the production of briquettes, but the quality will vary based on what you're using.
Okay, and this is someone who is in Uganda. So anything specific, or that's it?
In Uganda, anything that is available in Uganda agricultural-wise can be used. But the best issue is to get an abundant source of raw material, and for which it is able to produce enough for which the briquettes can be of a higher value. So depending on the raw materials you want to use, the calorific value will also differ on that. So if you're in Uganda, you have a lot of maize, you can still use that. If you have a lot of coffee husk, you can use that. Sugar cane as well can also be used. Yeah.
Can they use cassava?
Yes, they can also use cassava as well. Especially cassava is very, very good, has a higher calorific value as well.
All right, thank you. Solomon, you have it. So we've discussed about the different renewable energy sources. Now, with regards to climate change, you are trying to mitigate the emissions. Which ones could you easily propose, saying that we should invest more in that, the youth should invest in that? Phil?
Well, I could say we need to know what is available in our area. Like what Kefas has been saying, you need to bring, you need to see your environment, what your environment can provide. For example, the area that I'm in right now, it's Mafinga, and it's known for timber. So youth in this area, they are all trying to use wood sawdust to make briquettes. For example, there was a milk factory. Their OPEX is so high. I was just auditing them, and yet you see they're paying about $50 a week for a truck to come and collect the waste and water and everything. But if they invest and investigate or use donor community and impact investors, they can turn those waste into byproduct. They can reduce their own electricity bill by just using renewable energy, and it will be just waste to energy. So all I'm saying, for the youth that are nearby the factories, that are nearby big plantation, they should see this as opportunity. Just know your environment and see what you can do. And do just very simple things. And when you want to scale up, that's where you can go to big banks and investors to help them.
All right, thanks, Kefa.
I'd just like to add on what Phil has said. Phil has made some important points by saying the environment the people live in is what will determine the renewable energy solutions they should try and exploit. If you live in a place where there are too many agricultural waste material, for example, your farmhouse, you can try to move towards biogas. If you live in a high mountainous region, you can try wind energy. If you live in a place where there's a lot of like waste from agriculture, you can now try briquette production, but everything is only going to be dependent upon getting people information that renewable energy solutions are available and how they can take advantage and leverage all the resources they have at their disposal. So everything comes down to the localized level. So renewable energy can only be localized if people understand what is available to them and how can they be used to generate energy. Yeah.
Well, I like that point. However, yesterday we had a discussion on Twitter, and someone was saying that the youth could just establish their own solar power plants. And I was like, I remember when we were in Arusha with you, the three of you, or rather the two of you, when we were in Arusha, I remember we went to hydro mini grid. We also went to a solar power plant. And I think it was very hard for the people to sell the power to the local community. It's like you had to sell to the main grid or to the national regulator first before you can distribute. So it's like you can't sell directly to the community. So how, like you said, if you're in a higher place, you can start your own wind power. If you're in a hot area, solar power. But how is it going to be efficient, effective for you? You've used your money, you've used your resources, but then you cannot distribute, you cannot sell directly. I don't know, maybe it could be very different in Kenya, in Tanzania, but Phil, you can tell us about Tanzania.
For our case, it's different. If you have power that is, reliable, and it can be connected to the grid, you're welcome. But the problem has been in 2 years, we've been trying to sign the agreements in vain. Meaning, there are some people that are ready to connect and sell to the grid, but they cannot because the national utility is having a separate tariff rather than the approved tariff. So for us, it's kind of like political. We used to sign SPPAs. A lot of developers were connecting to the grid, but the focus is not connecting to the grid. The focus is to sell to the locals, so that at least you have prepaid money, and then to the utility for postpaid. You need to maintain your cash flow. But in terms of small scale hydros, those ones you need to use, for example, in your farmhouse or in your plantation. If it's just small, sometimes you cannot sell to the grid. So in our country, we have categories of, for example, zero up to 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt to 5, and 5 to 10. But the national grids can sometimes tell you, oh, this time around we want just this amount of power and all that. So for now, it's political, but things used to be so good in here. But I'm telling you, 1 megawatt can cost up to 5 million US dollars. Youth don't need to go to those big, projects at the beginning. They start small, but when there is potential, they grow with that potential. You need to know some of this renewable energy. Whatever you need to give what people can take, and you cannot even store, like electrons like briquettes. So you need to do your numbers correct in terms of how market rationale and all that. So I'm still encouraging youth to start these projects, but they need to know who are their buyers and how they are going to sell.
I think the youth should look for accessible solutions that are they can be able to finance within their own level. They cannot go for big projects because they lack the financing to do it, but they can look for feasible solutions that are within their range and are within their means of to be able to execute them. For example, in Kenya, we have the Kenya Youth Fund. It gives it gives youth about $1,000 to do any project they want for a group of 8 of them. So I believe those are where they should look for funding because it does not come with a lot of attachments included. So they should seek such achievable projects that are within their means of their capabilities. And for that said, they can seek bigger projects after they have been successful with the smaller projects. You have to start small to go big. And that's my assertion on the project.
Well, Caroline, just to add, there is a problem in East Africa, particular, or in Africa, which is management. We tend to be so ambitious, but sometimes we are not capable of managing the projects. This is why, for example, in our network, we are so keen to evaluate the team and the management itself before even we say no or yes to the project. So again, this is why I'm saying start small, and then you one day grow big.
To close our discussion, do you think we can separate politics, energy, and climate change?
Well, that's tricky. As youth, yes, we can, and as normal people, yes, we can, but I'm not quite sure for politicians. All I can say, renewable energy, like I said in the beginning, it's like COVID-19. You don't need politics around it. You just need to deal with the issue. So climate change, renewable energy, these things doesn't need politics. It needs professional people to do their job.
Phil said that we don't need politics when it comes to climate change and even looking at COVID-19. I agree with you, but again, remember, for us to address climate change, we require those policies. you said we need professionals, which is okay, but financing comes from the government. It has to be, budgeted for it. So I still think at this point it's hard. Let me give the scenario of Kenya. I think it's still hard to say we can separate politics and action on climate change, energy, because almost everything is decided by politicians. Our parliamentarians are politicians, so it's like everything is political. Look at America right now; they are trying to pull away from the Paris Climate Agreement. They are pulling away from the climate aspect, and it's all because of politics. So I think it can be really tricky, as you said. So I don't know what Kefa you think.
Sorry, before Kefa jumps in, Caroline.
Okay. Yes.
Let me tell you one thing. Everything begins with you. You don't need a politician to tell you you need to switch off your lights because it's maybe it's morning. You need to develop these habits to fight climate change. There are some things, Caroline, I can guarantee you, you don't need your president or your mayor or anybody to tell you that you need to do those things. This is why I'm saying let the technical people do the technical job. Yes, I know about the funding, but funding comes later. These things, for example, if every family will just switch on their lights when they don't use it, I'm telling you, you're going to save a lot of energy, which actually comes from fossil fuel. So I'm not saying that everything depends on the government or the politicians, but everything depends on us, probably.
Well, to avoid the confusion, in one way, politics is important at this point. On the other way, when it comes to our own initiatives, then we don't need politics. But on a larger spectrum, that was my point.
Hey, Carol.
Yeah.
To answer what you have been saying, I like to agree that it's impossible to separate politics from our policies. And that's because politicians are involved in almost every aspect of our lives. It is the energy initiatives we need to take on an individual level, but on a country level, policies are necessary to direct the direction the country should be heading towards when it comes to the adoption of renewable energy. For example, I've seen the reasons why countries in the Scandinavian countries are adopting renewable energy solutions, because their governments have placed an importance on policies that seek to support. For example, if it's the solar industries, there are tax reliefs for those. If there are companies that are moving towards adopting greener solutions, you see they get tax incentives by getting tax offs, the tax write-offs. So I'm saying, yes, at an individual level, you do not need the government to be involved in terms of adopting renewable energy. But if we want to move forward as a country or as a globe, I think policies and politicians are necessary to drive that initiative towards that. But they are not just the only key players. Politicians should just come in just only on the aspect of policies. But in terms of initiating those policies into play and actually getting things done, that comes down to me and you as individual stakeholders. Thank you.